It's actually my triceps.
See, we've done a workout, so there's a little bit of a... Oh, jeez. We're here at Farm Fitness, Jacko with Andrew Tracey, aka AT, and we've done a workout, we've recorded a podcast. The podcast was a flowering of just a natural conversation. We were just literally stood over here.
It's very spontaneous.
Very
isn't it?
spontaneous,
Yeah.
but I
All the
came
best things are.
wanting to do a workout with the guy, but even more importantly that I wanted to ask about this casual, oh yeah, I do 2 hours of meditation that he mentioned at the end of the last podcast. And so we're talking about all of that, and you're going to absolutely love it. So stay listening all the way to the end, where you give some
Hopefully
real tangible tips.
Yeah,
and
hopefully something actionable. Yeah.
So enjoy. Andrew Tracey on the Between Breaths podcast.
It's there till it switches off.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
ambient noise. I think most people don't realise how busy and distracted their mind is, because that's become their natural state.
Yeah.
And it's not until they try and sit.
Yeah.
There's the words just escaped me, but basically, like in Soto Zen, it's the word for it literally is just sit. So there's no real instruction. There's no object of concentration. It's just sit. Close your eyes or open your eyes, stare at the wall, and sit for 30 minutes and just see what comes up and just deal with what comes up. And most people can't handle that.
No, it's hard.
But because most people don't realise that their mind's default state, and that's probably why it's called the default mode network, right, is just constant rumination, because they feel like, oh, this is me, normal. I saw something the other day that said, oh, 50% of people don't have an internal dialogue. And I thought, no, I bet 50% of people don't realise that voice in their head is, they think that's just me.
Yeah.
You know? And until you sit down and learn to, I think that's why, especially in this day and age, we talk it's like muck mindfulness now, isn't it? Everything's a mindful this, a mindful that, but I don't think most people have the requisite concentration to actually realise that. Most people sit and think for 10 minutes and then go, what a great meditation that was, which is, it's still a great tool. But until you sit and you go, oh, that's a thought, that's a thought, that's a thought, that's a thought, that's when you realise, oh shit, this is super busy. Because otherwise people are sitting there going, my mind, they're sitting there thinking, my mind is so clear right now. Oh yeah, I'm so in the zone. What's that then? That's a thought, my friend. And the goal obviously isn't to stop that, it's just to realise that that's happening. But I think until you can do those breath practices and things like that with a very pointed reference to your concentration, so like, can I stay with the breath? Yeah. And then you're like, oh yeah, I'm staying with the breath. I'm so good at this. I'm so good at staying with, oh fuck. Yeah. Oh, I was just thinking about how good I am at staying with the breath. Yeah.
It's like if you, like one of the breathing light practices, almost trying to breathe so gently, so lightly that it's, you'd almost don't even notice it, and you're barely breathing at all. And then I was talking to someone that had done the certification with me, and she was like, when I've been doing it, she was a yoga teacher and she did meditation, and when she was like, when I'm doing the breathing light with my meditation, like sometimes I get to this like weird space where I'm like, I'm not holding my breath, but then I realise I'm not breathing, but not in a like stressful way. It's like bliss. And then as soon as I notice it,
it goes.
Yeah. And I've only had it literally like once where I'm like, this feels amazing. Oh, it's gone. Yeah. You notice it
because it's your ego that goes, this feels amazing. Yeah. And then that's the thing that can never, this is like the paradox of enlightenment, right? The wanting of it is the thing that precludes you from having it. And the minute you go, oh yeah, I'm here, and then you're like, oh, you're not. Who thought that? Oh, that's it's like, they talk about that in Rinzai Zen a lot. Rinzai is much more prescriptive. They will actually talk about, here's some common things that might happen, and one of those is, they will say like, oh, you'll stop breathing. Like, obviously you don't stop breathing, but you're being breathed, I think, becomes the more, and it's so light and it's so long, and you're so out of space and time that the inhale, like subjectively, feels so long that it feels like it's not even happening, right?
You're just not noticing.
You're just being.
You're almost noticing nothing.
Yeah.
Therefore,
Yeah. It's the mirror you know, if you think of your experience as a big mirror, there's fewer and fewer objects until there's just the mirror.
Yeah.
And yeah, a few times I've been to that space, and then the little voice goes, "Oh, so what happens when the mirror reflects nothing?" And then you go, "Oh, who thought that?" And you're back there. But the discipline is just always coming back and coming back and coming back. And I can't remember who said, like, awakening or enlightenment, however you want to sort of think of it, happens by accident, but meditation makes you accident prone. You just have to, you just keep trying, you just keep going at it, and it's paradoxical, but yeah. Ozzy, you shouldn't be. Yeah, Adja would be the prime probably person who would say something like that. Like, he just gets it, doesn't he? And yeah, I don't often do, I very rarely do like guided sits anymore, just because again, it feels a little bit like, am I just distracting myself with someone else's voice? But the minute I put Adja or Henry Shukman or Rupert Spear or any of those guys, and this could be, if you want to talk about it from a physiological level, this could be like, oh, well, we just co-regulating, like even just your voice detached is just like a co-regulation of our nervous system. Is there something very Freudian in here about like the father's voice? But something about Adja just instantly, I actually was on the overground train recently, and I was like, I'm going to do a guided meditation because it's a bit loud in here. And I put on some Adyashanti, and instantly, even on the train, I was just there, just dropped straight in, just hearing his voice. Yeah, he's a cool guy, isn't he?
Meditation was one of the main things I did want to talk to you about. So I'm glad it's nice that this is just a natural conversation. And part of me wants to go like, well, so what's your practice? And I think people may find that interesting. So you can sort of feel, we've been talking about it a little bit, but like for someone that's basically a starting point, what would be your advice to someone that's like, okay, I follow Andrew Tracey, I follow AT, like I love all the like lifting and the blah, 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 and then it's like, oh, and then he's actually talking about some of this other stuff that intrigues me, but I've got no idea where to start. Where was your starting point, and or where would you like give someone some tips if they were like, okay, I'm up for entertaining this?
I find it really awkward to talk about because I think that it's such a marketable thing now, isn't it? But I think anyone and everyone that I feel as though I've learned from, and I'm talking all the way back to like Shakyamuni Buddha, like the OG Buddha, right up to like Roshis and people like Adyashanti and Rupert Spear that we were just talking about.
What's your time span of that like for you? Like when did you start getting more serious with that?
I don't know about more serious. I bought the just kind of randomly felt drawn to over. We're probably pushing 11 years now. Okay. Had some, as we all do, had some like major upsets in my personal life, and I don't know what prompted this. At the time, I was doing like this part-time course for this project we were doing of getting my like scaffolding ticket in a construction college at Leighton, and I ordered a book of the Zen teachings of the Bodhidharma, and I don't know what inspired that. And when I look back now, like I could not possibly have understood what I was reading. Because there's books now that I put on my list to read, but I'm like, right, I need to read these other 10 books before, just so I get to this place. And so I was just reading the Zen teachings of Bodhidharma. He's like the first patriarch of Zen. He introduced Buddhism to China. It became Chan, and then that becomes Zen. And that was like 11 years ago, and I was on and off with that, and I definitely went through the space of doing the phase of doing like the headspace thing and some 10-minute guided meditations, on and off, which is, I think that stuff's kind of like a really good, if you want the physiological stuff, it's gonna calm you down. You're gonna get all the stuff they study to do with meditation, you're probably gonna get that from there. And then probably about 4 or 5 years ago, was when, and again, I don't know why. I don't know why, but I was like, this is something that I'm going to take really seriously now. This is something that I'm going to stop treating it as like this. Almost, previously I'd maybe always treated it like the same way that people who aren't into fitness treat fitness where they're like, right, okay, I've got to get fit. I'm going to start going to the gym. So it was like that. It was like, right, I'm
going to get enlightened.
I'm going to get enlightened. Yeah. But I don't think I'd even thought about it from that point of
No,
view.
yeah,
It was just like that kind of very, how it's presented in the media in the West of like this, like, like, you know, that stuff.
I think it's a little bit like we were saying with the breath training of like, once you sort of dip your toe in it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And you dip your toe in it and you like go, there's just something in this. I think there's sort of stuff that there's truth to it. So there's just something in it, and you just then get drawn further in.
You can't unsee it, right? When you have those first, and it's so strange. It seems so strange to me now that this isn't stuff we don't tell people straight from the off. Like this, the very basic tenet of meditation of just observing your thoughts and realizing that they just occur. You know, that you can't try and do it. Like try and trace back when you have a thought. Well, who thought that? Well, me. Well, when was the point then that I went, okay, I'm going to think this? Like, how do you manufacture? No, they just occur. Or are you the one that hears them? Or, you know, once you start having that realization of, oh, a thought is just a thought, and then you create that little bit more space, and an emotion is just an emotion, and it's not to say they're not important, and the goal isn't, I don't think, to get to a space where there's nothing. The goal is just to get to a space where they're almost like adverts for how it could be. You know, a thought is, it doesn't have to become anything. An emotion doesn't have to become anything until you embody it. Yeah. And I think, or let you identify with it. You're like, oh, this is me thinking. Yeah. And the minute you start realizing, like, oh, hey, these things are just occurring. You can't unknow that. You can't unknow that. And you do forget it, and you do get wrapped around the axle of silly thoughts, and we all do that. And I think I started taking it really seriously. And then once you get that first insight into, like, you actually have spent the time to let your nervous system calm, to let the dust of, you know, of your experience settle, and you start seeing what at the time feels like the inner landscape of your mind, although now I would say there's no inner, there's no outer, there's just experience. You're like, oh, hey, this isn't what I thought it was. And you can't unsee that. And that was when I was like, okay, well, what is this thing then? Is there like a codified path to this? This is obviously more than just sitting down for 10 minutes and listening to Andy Puddicombe. Like, no disrespect, that they've done amazing things, Headspace, but there's a path, and that was, you know, I started reading, got really heavily into reading, you know, texts from Eastern wisdom traditions and from people who've brought this stuff to the West, particularly Zen and Advaita Vedanta and those sort. And even there are non-dual traditions that aren't necessarily traditions. They're just completely focused on understanding this from a secular point of view. Like, what is this experience, and investigating the nature of your mind. And I would say, you know, outside of, let's say, you know, you've got the conditioned world where you've got your friends and your family and the goals you've got in life. Let's hold that separately, because I have priorities there, obviously. But aside from that, I would say, like, one of the biggest priorities in my life is just being on this path of investigation into the nature of, and it really is so hard to explain, because you're like, well, so what? You just like meditate a couple of times a day, and you're like, well, yeah, it's just that, but what happens in the rest of your life is so subtle, but it changes everything. Like, it changes everything. And I think as long as you don't get caught in like spiritual materialism, says me, wearing like mala beads as we talk, and you don't get caught in that like spiritual materialism of being like, okay, I'm going to make this my whole identity now, and because you don't need to. You really don't need to. I think
I definitely need some beads.
I think that you shift and you start to incline towards those things because you're spending more of your time reading and looking at certain materials. But that's like in anything, right? You know, if you started skateboarding, you start dressing in that way. It's like anything. You know? I haven't got anything Gymshark on now, but you know, it happens. It happens to the best of us.
The hair's growing long.
but you don't need to have any of that. And if you can swerve that sort of pick and mix spiritual materialism, and I think this is something you see. And this is no disrespect to anyone, but this is something you see in the breath world, on the more like healing and that side of it, where you'll talk to some people and they've sort of picked bits and bats from various traditions, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you're sort of streamlining it into the 21st century. But I do think there's something to be said for picking an area and going all in, rather than building an identity around this like mishmash of things. But I really haven't answered your practice.
But it's useful just hearing the like. It is like one of the things I wanted to get a workout done with you, and then wanted to just let you finished the first podcast we did with like casually dropped in like, oh well, if you want to talk about woo woo, I'm pretty far out there. I meditate for 2 hours every day, and it was like we're about an hour and a half into the podcast. It was like, okay, we're going to have to talk about that later, and wanting just to let there be some space for your mind, brain, but just for you to just do exactly as you just did.
And I don't think I've ever really spoken about this. Like I've got to a place.
So I really appreciate you like being open about it.
I like to be really open. I just don't think it's come up, No. And I got to the point where I became much more comfortable sharing things, because especially I think on social media, you can end up cultivating a sort of avatar and it was very much. This is this fitness side of me, and it's a character, and it's not a character. It's still who I am, but it's these small parts of it. And I was like, well, this other stuff is so big and important to me, and the crossover is huge.
Yeah, but that's the thing that's nice with what you're doing. Yeah, but it's like it's not like you don't like doing a workout anymore because you've been enlightened through meditation.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? It's like these two things.
And I think
together.
they dovetail beautifully.
Yeah.
I think that and this is what I try and share. And I think maybe I hate to use this word, but maybe that eventually would become my niche. Is like,
I called you the fitness philosopher. You might hate that. I don't know.
But this, the central tenet of Buddhism is dukkha, is suffering or unsatisfactoriness, and this theme runs deep in working out, and it runs deep in like there's always parallels, and I'm not the first person to draw them between working out and life, right? There's so many metaphors and analogies you can draw, but what you can learn from the investigation of your mind on the cushion, in meditation, carries over perfectly. Like it's like we were talking about earlier, and especially with your breath and stuff, the ability to observe sort of somatic sensations, the sensations of your body at a super high definition, but with the space to see them for what they are, and not just this nebula. The difference between going, what am I actually feeling? Well, this is the carbon dioxide in my blood rising, and this is a natural response to it. But here's the thing: when I get to the end of this lap, I'm going to be able to take a breath, and slowing it down enough to have that conversation, or just that to be your primary way of thinking, of operating, versus being caught in the fuck, this is so hard, oh my god, I'm gonna, and the feeling of what do people call, I've heard, I don't know if it's Brad McKenzie, I've heard carbon dioxide called like the molecule of death, because that's what it signals, right? It signals like you're gonna die.
Yeah.
But if you can slow it down enough, and I think this is what you truly cultivate in meditation, is enough to slow it down, to break everything down into its constituent individual parts and go, well, this is just a bodily sensation, and this is just a strong emotion related to that bodily sensation, and this is just a thought of what I want to do right now based on those two things. And when you can see that chain of cause and effect, you can then cut it and go, but here's the thing, what I actually want to do is get to the end here, and I'm not going to die if I do that, or I'm not going to die if I keep going on this air bike. And you can cut that, you can uproot, kind of pull the rug out from underneath the voice in your head that's telling you that story.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you were rolling when we said this, but people talk about running is my meditation, or lifting is my meditation. There's no doubt you're coming into like a flow state when you do those things, but until you've actually learned to meditate, and the reason you sit down and you do it on a cushion without any other distractions is that there's literally less to think about. There's less load, less cognitive load. until you learn to do that and you get that tool of mindfulness firmly in hand, then you can come back to what you're doing and genuinely make it a meditation. But it's hard. It's hard when there's all these things, all these objects of consciousness going on to be streamlined. But that's what you practice when you sit. And I think what it gives back to you, I think particularly concentration practices. So in mindfulness traditions, you would have concentration practices, and then you would move into mindfulness practice. So for instance, a really easy one to sort of reference is if you go on a Theravadan, which is a school of Buddhism retreat, you'll do a few days of Anapana, which is mindfulness of breathing. So you do 3 days, 4 days, or if you're just at home, if you're just learning, you begin by just following your breath, because that's an object of concentration.
Yeah.
So you follow that, and then once that gives you that anchor to come back to every time, and then you start realizing, like, I'm coming back to my breath. Oh, okay, these thoughts are occurring, these emotions are occurring, these bodily sensations are occurring, but I keep coming back to the breath, and then you can start to see them all separately. Once you've fostered that concentration, then you can move into more mindfulness, open mindfulness practices where you can begin. So you've sort of got to get it right in here before you can get it right out there. And in wisdom traditions, not all of them, but those concentration practices are like the preliminary practices. They're like the armbands of learning, right? But I think a lot of these things are written 2,500 and older in the Vedic traditions years ago, and didn't have TikTok and they didn't have Instagram. And
Did it?
No, I don't think they did. No.
Well, didn't Instagram, but it was just pictures.
It was just on the wall. Yeah, they didn't have all of that. So I do think, and the Buddha said this himself, like the Buddha said to his bhikkhus, like the monks, like, you have to keep updating this, guys. You have to update this in order to. It's not like, I'm going to get in trouble here, but it's not like Abrahamic religions or anything where they're like, this is it. These are the 10 Commandments, these are the rules. The Buddha was like, suck it and see it, try it for yourself. Like, I'm not telling you anything that you can't go away and find out. And B, he was like, you've got to update this. And I think concentration practices, whereas once upon a time, perhaps they were the building blocks, and then you get the tool of concentration in hand, and now you can move on to open mindfulness. I think in this day and age, and I can only speak from my own experience here, it's more important. We need to spend more time there. So to be actionable, and again, I'm not a meditation teacher, the people I take inspiration from have long lineages of passing down, like literally permission to teach. I don't think this is something you can go away and learn on a 2-week course. But in terms of concentration practices, it really is a case of picking an object of concentration. For some, in the Vedic traditions, they might do a mantra, and it's just always coming back to that. But I think, and this is my own personal take on it, it's not necessarily anything new, but the reason I think the breath is such a powerful object of concentration for concentration practices is because it doesn't only give you that anchor, like, wherever your mind goes, you always come back to the breath. That's it. That's literally all it is. Whatever your mind goes, come back to the breath. But you have the obvious physiological effects of slowing down your breath. Now, if you're doing mantra practice, or if you're doing, chanting or anything else like that, where it's just an object of concentration, the knock-on effect of that might be that and it probably is going to be as your nervous system downregulates, your breath slows down. But just put the horse before the cart. Just focus on the breathing, and it will begin to, we know this, the minute you become conscious of your breathing, it starts to slow down and it starts to do right thing. So if you can stay with the breath, and that's what I call like letting the dust settle, and those breaths, those exhales start to get longer. At the top of that inhale, you have that little bit of time, you've got that little bit of time to walk around. And when you're 15, 20, 40 minutes into a sit of following the breath, that bit of time at the top of the inhale is forever. You're rising, and you're floating. It's like an arrow being shot into the air, and it floats, as your sense of time sort of diminishes, that's floating for so long, and then that exhale comes down. I think the nervous system ramifications of making the breath the object of your concentration are not to be, because there are some, you mentioned Sam Harris earlier, I think Sam Harris says it's just another object of concentration.
Yeah,
It could be
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
But I believe there is a physiological
Benefit to the- yeah.
far be it for me to sort of dispute Sam. He's obviously a much
Yeah.
smarter man than me, but I do think there is a physiological benefit to making the breath the object of
Yeah, yeah.
concentration. So that's it. Just stand with the breath.
Yeah.
Make a commitment to the time you're going to sit. So that will instantly, if you've got that itchiness, especially when you first start, your
Yeah.
mind's going crazy.
Like,
You
it can
get
be first
uncomfortable.
10 seconds,
Yeah,
you're like,
you're like-
itching.
Yeah, you're like, what am I doing? How long is it? How long have I been here?
Have I won yet?
Yeah, exactly that. So if you make a commitment to a time, so like in Zen, they might light an incense. So they meditate with their eyes open, but some people find that too distracting.
Yeah.
The idea of that is, well, life's distracting, so get
Yeah,
used to it.
yeah.
They might light an incense stick and just watch it. Just watch that incense stick
nice.
go down. That gives them the time. But if you set an alarm on your phone,
Yeah.
then
but just-
commit to that. Instead of having that thing of being like, how long have I been doing this for? The commitment is, it doesn't matter what's going on in here.
Yeah.
You've set a timer for however long it is. Now, I know some people will say the important thing is just to do it and do it however long you've got. And I do fundamentally agree with that.
Yeah.
But I do also
But just
think
as a starting point for someone.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
And because it can be so painful,
Yeah.
it might put you off for life. It would be like if the first run you ever went on was a marathon. You're going to get to the 10-mile mark and you're going to go, fuck this, and may never run again. So I do understand, beginning small, but I will say, don't get caught in the trap of believing that's all you ever, 10 minutes is all you ever need, because, and I say, like my weird little sort of motto is, all the good stuff happens after the 30-minute mark. And this is, this is my own concentration span, so I can't speak for anybody else, but it's not until then that I really feel like I've come down enough and I'm down-regulated enough and there's enough space and the dust has settled enough to begin proper inquiry. So it's for me, it's normally around the 30-minute mark at which I can sometimes, or I can let go of that object of concentration and get into some real self-inquiry of like being like, what, and it's as simple as going like, what's really here?
Yeah.
Don't refer to fault, don't try and answer the question, what is here? And just see what happens. Just keep asking, just come back to that. But I think the breath is amazing because it's with you everywhere. It's with you everywhere. There's a, people think of this as a really base, and again, it's because you have this sort of syllabus of meditation that begins with concentration and you move into, but you can go along, I think supposedly, allegedly, Anapana, like mindfulness of the breath, is what the Buddha was doing when he reached enlightenment, right? However you want to feel about that, I think he was a real historical figure. And I think enlightenment is nothing more than reaching a space of kind of non-dual awareness when you realise, oh, I'm not some little person in my head pulling the strings and here's this big, crazy, scary world out there. It's just the world. There's just the world. There's just this. And one of the deepest insights, and I keep a meditation diary, and I'd look insane if anyone ever read it, but one of the deepest insights of
Part 3. We delve into
I'll just
that.
read it out loud.
Is it got like a key lock on it? Like,
It's got a like
12-year-old girl's
passcode,
like, is it pink?
It's a little Polly Pocket one. One of the deepest insights I ever had in meditation was just this sudden feeling of nothing inside, nothing outside, just this. And that is where instantly that's where I try and go in meditation now, where I realise like, there's not some little me in here.
I love it.
Because my brain is in my head, is in this world. Where's anything else? There's nothing between you and I right now. There's just my experience of you, and I don't know that there's anything more than that. And I think that's all probably enlightenment is maybe the stabilisation of that, of living. And the closest approximation for people is like flow state. We've all had it, where our sense of self diminishes, and there's just the acting.
The sense of time, the sense of everything diminishes.
There's just this, and that's where you perform at your best, right?
Yeah,
Because you're not getting in your own way.
Yeah.
When you go to, it's participatory knowledge. When you pick up a ball to throw it, you don't go, right, now I'm going to lift my arm, and now I'm going to cock my hand back to this angle, and I'm going to turn my hips. You just do it. But what happens when you do start thinking about it, when you get in your own way, is when you cock it up. So that's why, when we get into a flow state, our sense of self just diminishes and you're just in it, right? You see it, we're at Fun Fitness now, you see it all the time. You put people in groups training, and there's people that, perhaps are the type of people that traditionally would go to the gym and just go for a walk on an incline treadmill, and they'd be a bit too intimidated. You put them in a group environment, outside, and all these flow triggers, and you see them do things that, and they're not even thinking about it. They're not thinking like, that's sort of really heavy farmer's hand. It's just like, what, there to there, do it. And I think maybe that's what enlightenment or awakening, however you want to put it, maybe that's what it is I don't know, I'm not cooked enough, as Ramdas would say, but it's, maybe it's stabilizing that, where you're just the flow of experience. In Zen, there's a really simple practice called Susoku-san, or Susoku-san, yeah, which is just counting the breath. It's just counting the breath. And I think what that gives you, and I know in some traditions they say don't count the breath because that's, you know, then your ego gets involved and you're making a target. But I think what that gives you is almost a metric, because if you'll very quickly realize there's like 3 rules. Count your breath, don't lose count, don't be distracted. That's the 3 rules. You'll very quickly realize, you know, maybe I can do that. I can count to 10. And you sit down and you go, where was I? Like, and you know, when I first started, like really, and you do have to exist in this place between surrender and actually a bit of discipline. When I first started really focusing on it, I realized that, I can't actually get to 4. Wow. And if I do get to 4, a voice goes, nice one, mate, you got to 4. And you're like, all right, back to 1. And I do think that gives you a nice little metric. Just can I stay with the breath? Just in, and then just on the exhale, 1. And just drag it out. Drag that 1 out for the entire breath. And some people say go to 10 and come back. Some people, I like to have that slightly bigger metric. And as you get out to like 13, it's inhale is the third. Hold it on the T, in, hold it, and you just go through it like that, and you soon realize how noisy your mind is. And then when you realize that's the default state, but you give yourself space and you give yourself permission compassionately to accept that and not be like, oh my God, my mind, I've got to push these. You don't have to push these thoughts away. I think it's D.T. Suzuki that says, open the front door of your mind, but open the back door. And then now just blow straight through. The minute a thought comes in, if you then go, oh bollocks, that's a thought, what am I that's more thought. It's almost like 2 storm fronts hitting, right? The thought that just arises by itself, and then the thought that is a reaction to the thought, and then before you know it, you're in a thought storm. Just let it go, just come back to the breath as an anchor, come back to the count. That would be my advice. Set the alarm, do give yourself a decent amount of time, like be realistic. It's going to be hard at first, maybe edge yourself in, maybe begin with some guided ones, but set the alarm, because that gets rid of this, how long have I been doing this for? Well, should I check the clock? And all of that is, it's fine, but it is noise.
And I think it's one of those things like, it's all fine.
It is.
And I think my hope from people listening to this is, as I am, encouraged by you and your passion and you can just see your like hunger for it and how it sort of said it changed everything. And I think that you've like pulled out a couple of things that people can get started with it.
I hope so.
But I hope that they just hear it's almost how you're saying it, as well as how you feel about it, as well as what you're saying. And for some parts of that, people will want to go back and, hold on a minute, I need to re-listen to some of that because I need to process that. But as an ending sort of point to this conversation, for people to be like, okay, I get why you wanted to have this conversation with him, Jacko, because I'm encouraged to like go and just start this thing, and maybe I'll try the counting, maybe I'll try just the sitting and being, like maybe I'll set 1 minute, or whatever the thing is, that they just take some encouragement to start, and those that want to start going further down the rabbit hole will then.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. Like we were saying, like about multiple things earlier. Once you see it, once you have the insight, you can't unsee it. Yeah. It's permanently hardwired in your brain. And I think if you have, there's a saying in Zen which is like you have to have great doubt, and great faith. So you have the doubt of, is everything really what I think it is? But you have faith that if you pay attention and investigate it, there'll be some fruit. Like it will bear fruit. And I think that if you have faith that the longer you spend sitting and the longer you spend honestly investigating the reality of your mind, that carries over. It does carry over, because eventually you create that space in sitting, you begin seeing things for what they are, which is just these individual little reactionary thoughts and ideas and sensations. And then the lines begin to blur. That becomes hardwired, like muscle memory. So that then suddenly you find yourself in a meeting and someone says something that pisses you off, but instead of becoming pissed off, you go, oh, there's a strong emotion. Oh, it's probably because I feel attacked, and it gives you the space. And this is all stuff that you can learn in psychotherapy, and you can learn from Stoicism and all these reframing mechanisms. But I think what meditation does, it provides you the tool to strengthen the ability to put those things into action. So it's all good to give someone a load of Marcus Aurelius quotes about, or Seneca, like, we suffer more in our imagination. Cool, but I am suffering. So how does knowing that help me? Whereas meditation gives you the space to go, oh, that's what he meant by that. It's just, I don't have to action this thought. I don't have to embody this thought. I can just let it go. In fact, I'm not going to try and run away from it. I'm going to stare. Oh, someone said something in work that annoyed me. I'm not going to try and shake it off. I'm going to stare straight at it. And the half-life of emotions, when you start staring at the obvious, real emotions in life, just those little things, someone cuts you up in traffic, or someone's a bit rude to you, unless you keep it going, you perpetuate it by going, why did he say that to me? What a dickhead. Oh, well, next time I come back in here, well, I won't be shopping here anymore. Like, you keep it going. Whereas if you go, it's interesting that made me feel that way. It's hard. I'm making it sound incredibly easy. I'm not saying I don't fly off the handle at times. I'm saying it happens much less. I'm saying that my ability to go, oh yeah, you're a bit annoyed about something. Oh, let's have a look at it, is strengthened. And I think getting on the mat, having a sit, investigating the nature of your own mind as often as you can and for as long as you can is training for that. It teaches you to make that space. I hope.
Awesome. I would love to hear from people, but people know how they can get in contact with me. If someone, once you've listened to this again, because you've been in process of that, if they want to reach out to you, want to connect you on whether it's training, whether it's meditation, like where's a good place for people to
just
find
Instagram. There's the big shop front is Andrew.Tracey on Instagram. Or just like put my name into Google. There is a South African musician called Andrew Tracey, but I think I'm just edging.
Andrew Tracey.
I'm just edging him out on I'm sure he's amazing. I've actually listened to some of his music just to be like, oh, hey, cool.
You do some Google ads on his name.
I think I've got slightly better SEO now. But we're in a war that neither of us actually knows, or I doubt he knows.
He knows it's happening.
Just Google it. But yeah, the Andrew.Tracey on Instagram is where I'm at.
Awesome. Mate, thanks so much.
Dude, absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
I like how that just evolved into...